Welcome back to another exciting episode of the Any Given Day podcast. Today we're going to be talking about some award finalists, along with some more transfer portal chaos, and all the conference championship game reviews, along with our reactions to the controversial college football playoff rankings and our preview for America's game, Army versus Navy. So sit back, relax, and get ready for another exciting episode of the Any Given Day podcast. Welcome back to another episode of the Any Given Day podcast. We're going to start off today's episode with our reactions to the 2023 Heisman finalists. Those would be LSU's quarterback Jaden Daniels, Ohio State's wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr., Oregon quarterback Bo Nix, and Washington quarterback Michael Penix Jr. I don't know about you, but to me, there seems to be one player in these finalists that sticks out like a sore thumb. I mean, for me, Marvin Harrison Jr. isn't even going to win the Biletnikoff Award, and we got him as a Heisman finalist when he really hasn't had that great of a year. Like, he's had a good year, but it's not Heisman type year. I think a lot of it has to do with that junior on the end of his name.
Yep.
And who his daddy is. That has a lot to do with why he's there. Other than him, though, I think it's a good list. It's everybody I thought would be there other than him. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on it?
I'm kind of... I definitely agree with you. I saw someone earlier today go and say Brooks Austin basically went and said, well, no, it wasn't him. It was Jonathan Williams. He said that when you really look at this Heisman class, there's not like a Joe Burrow in this class, that you could honestly make the argument that the last great Heisman winner was Devonta Smith in 2020. A wide receiver like Marvin Harrison Jr., but you compare Marvin Harrison Jr.'s numbers to Devonta Smith's numbers, Devonta Smith just blows him out of the water. Marvin Harrison Jr. is a great wide receiver. Probably going to be the first wide receiver off the board in the draft. I don't think he's a Heisman finalist. I don't think he's even the best wide receiver this year. But, I'm also the guy that thinks Jaden Daniels should run away with this. That's just my take on it. If you really want to get to the nitty and gritty, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but I think the argument could be made now that by ESPN's metrics, Jordan Travis should be the odds-on favorite to win the Heisman. But we'll get to that later, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, before we move on, you think Jaden Daniels is going to win this?
Oh, hands down. I would be shocked if he doesn't. Absolutely shocked.
I mean, I think it's down between Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix. Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix have about the same numbers, but Jaden Daniels has arguably done it against superior talent. Not to say that Oregon hasn't played some good teams this year, but I mean, Jaden Daniels has done very good against some really good teams this year. So I think Jaden Daniels should win it, but it's probably going to be freaking Marvin Harrison Jr. or something. They're going to find a way for him to win a Heisman. It shouldn't be. There should be no way. It should be either Bo Nix or Jaden Daniels, but
Jaden Daniels should win this hands down.
Yeah.
But moving on into the next little portion for tonight, our transfer portal reactions. Been a lot of names going in and out of the portal, mainly into the portal, such as Tyler Buckner over at Alabama. He's actually entered the transfer portal again He notably left Notre Dame to head to Alabama after Tommy Rees was hired from Notre Dame to be the new offense coordinator over at Alabama. However, he is not entering the transfer portal again as a football player. He is entering as a men's lacrosse player. That's right, people. He's decided, maybe I'm not a good quarterback after all. Let's go and try this sport. So, hey, props to him. If he thinks he'll do better at lacrosse, by all means. You got a reaction to that at all? Because I know you had a bit of a reaction earlier when you found out about it.
I mean, he's not a good quarterback. Definitely not a good football player. So more power to him, I guess. But it was just strange that
you were shocked by it.
I was.
Am I saying this right?
Very strange. Yeah, I looked at the notes and went, men's lacrosse, what? But
are you sure you put this in right, Hunter? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I put it in right.
More power to him, I guess. I mean, that's his true passion. Good for him, yep. I guess.
Next transfer. Well, and we're just going over some notable transfers. I probably should have said that to begin with in this little section. But the next guy, DJU, is back in the transfer portal again. Apparently, FSU and Louisville were like the leading candidates for him. But Louisville just landed Tyler Show, who transferred from Texas Tech. So I would hedge my bet on FSU possibly landing DJU, which could make for an interesting matchup if Florida State ends up playing Clemson this year. I think they do. I think that are they division rivals? Or do they even have divisions anymore? I'm so confused by that sometimes. Anyways, DJU's second transfer in 2 years. My bad. Third school though.
Yeah.
It's just, man, it's getting rough out here. Next one would be Colorado tight end Michael Harrison. And he's entered the transfer portal. He had like 5 touchdowns this year for them. He had some pretty big catches in the Colorado State game. I do know that. Then you had Colorado quarterback Kason Wiseman, who was a freshman. He's going to have 4 years of eligibility. And the notable thing about those guys leaving is they're not the only ones. There's a lot of people transferring and decommitting to Colorado right now. I'm wondering what that's about. But
it seems like it's just a mass exodus. I mean,
yep,
something's going on over there, and everybody's getting away as quick as they can. Like I said, we don't really know exactly what it is, obviously, but I can understand Wiseman leaving because obviously Shedeur Sanders isn't going anywhere, and he's not going to waste his time. But
yeah,
I mean, Michael Harrison had a pretty decent year this year, and then he's leaving, even though he was featured pretty heavily. I don't quite understand that, but obviously something's going on.
Yeah. And to be fair, Harrison was featured pretty heavily when Sean Lewis was still the OC, so that might be something right there.
Yeah.
The next thing to the next player, Brock Vandegrift. He was back up over at Georgia this year, quarterback. Any and every Georgia fan, I feel like, knew this was coming. From what I've heard, it didn't matter if Beck's coming back or not, which that's an entire thing. Apparently, that's going to depend on if he's evaluated as a top 10 pick, I think. So, that's something. So, Vandegrift, when he first entered the portal, I didn't know where he was going to land, but then all of a sudden Kentucky started to pop up, and next thing you know, he's actually committed to Kentucky. I would say this is probably the best quarterback they've landed in the transfer portal in a bit. Maybe.
Yeah.
It really depends. Because
former 5-star.
Yeah. A true dual threat, too.
Yeah.
I will say this. He will definitely be interesting in Kentucky's offense. I do believe that. 100%. That
Yeah.
will be interesting.
I mean, if Mark Stoops is known for anything, it's for taking transfers out of the portal and turning them into something even greater. I mean, they don't get a whole lot of good recruits out of high school, but they get a bunch of good kids out of the portal, and he turns them into great football players.
Yeah,
So, I mean, good
great at
luck to Brock
developing.
Vandergriff. Yeah, so I
Great at
mean, good luck to
developing.
Brock Vandergriff, and
Yep,
I expect Devin Leary to probably be in the portal now, if he can't beat Brock Vandergriff out, because this
maybe.
is Leary's last year. So I mean, what else is he gonna do?
Yep. And one notable thing is that about that is Vandergriff. He did already graduate the University of Georgia, so he's technically he's going to be a graduate transfer, and he's going to have 2 years of eligibility from here. So he really did have to go and transfer to get some playing time. The other one, the next transfer portal name would be Juice Wells, wide receiver from South Carolina. Apparently, he's getting some looks from Texas and Tennessee. Beamer ball, right? Beamer
Yep.
ball. Ohio State wide receiver Julian Fleming is hitting the transfer portal, which, from what I remember, he was a pretty big name coming out of high school. I
He's
think he
number
might have
one
been
wide receiver coming out of high school.
yeah, and then he just got stuck behind uh Egbuka, I think is the dude's last name, and Harrison Jr. and a lot of them. So
Yeah,
it kind
Emeka
of makes sense.
Egbika.
Yeah, Emeka Egbuka. Yeah. So for him to transfer, it kind of makes sense, you know. Uh, I guarantee he's going to be a starter wherever he goes. Next would be Utah quarterback Bryson Barnes. This one makes sense. Cam Rising's already said he's coming back next year. He's going to be fully healthy, hopefully next year. So that's going to be his job when he gets back. Bryson Barnes is smart to do this. He pretty good this year. I'll be honest. So there is that. The next name would be Dylan Gabriel, Oklahoma's quarterback this year. He's hit the transfer portal for the second time. This was a kid who transferred from UCF to Oklahoma, and now he's transferring from Oklahoma. And I guess that's going to be because Jeff Levy left to become the head coach over at Mississippi State. Apparently, from what I could gather, Oregon's like the favorite to land him right now, and USC is like starting to make a late push for him. So that's gonna be interesting to watch. Thoughts on that one?
It came as a bit of a surprise, personally. It wasn't like he was getting passed up, and he had a pretty good year at Oklahoma. But I guess if he feels like at Oregon or USC, he has a better chance to have a good season. And I can see why Oregon would be a spot if seeing what Bo Nix just did this year. If he thinks he can go there and have the same type of year and has a better chance of getting drafted than staying at Oklahoma, and especially with Oklahoma moving to the SEC next year, it could be a very tough schedule and a very tough transition year for Oklahoma. So I can see why he would possibly want to transfer, but it definitely came as a surprise when I saw his name come in the portal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'll be honest, I was kind of shocked by it, but then I thought, oh well, hey, Jeff Levy just left. That might have been the reason why he was out at Oklahoma to begin with. So we'll know. We'll know a bit more here in the next few days. The next name is another Oregon State quarterback, Aiden Chiles, however you pronounce his name. And yeah, and turns out earlier today he went and committed to Michigan State. So there you go on that one. He's already got his figured out. Only a few more names then, I promise. Tennessee defensive back Brandon Turnage. He's entered the transfer portal. Haven't really seen that much about him. Next name would be Ohio State quarterback Kyle McCord. I'd say this is a shocker, but it might also not be, because you look at how many people from Ohio State right now are in the transfer portal, and it is actually kind of crazy to think about. Because I think like somewhere between 12 and 15 people are in the transfer portal right now, just from Ohio State. I don't know if something's happening over there or if they're just not afraid to say, hey, look, guys, you aren't what we thought, and you're probably not going to get to play here again. So go ahead, get to the transfer portal, find somewhere. I will also point out that Ohio State has been heavily connected to Cam Ward, who's entered the transfer portal from Washington State. So that's something to keep an eye on. Texas A&M defensive linemen Walter Nolan and LT Overton have both entered the transfer portal. That's pretty huge. They were both some pretty highly rated defensive linemen coming out of high school. LT Overton actually was the number one player in the 2023 class and then reclassified to 2022 and was still ranked a 5-star in the 2022 class, even after reclassifying, which is pretty wild when you think about it. Because you got to think 5 stars are the guys that the recruiting industry believes these guys are supposed to be first-round picks. So the fact that he's like, hey, I want to go and leave college early. I want to be part of this class. Guys who have they're a year older, a year more of experience, and he was still viewed as one of the best players in the nation. So that's something. Not to mention Texas A&M keeps losing guys as well. Mike Elko is going to have a hard time retaining people at this point, I think. So.
Yeah. I mean, what does that say about the hire? You know, they hire him and then players are like, nah, I'm getting out almost immediately. I mean, I don't know.
I think they're going to regret not getting Stoops.
I agree.
That's just my thought. Last two, I promise. UCLA quarterback Dante Moore, who was a freshman. He's hit the transfer portal. Everyone kind of saw this coming. I believed it had something to do with the NIL payments not getting properly fleshed out. Either that or false promises about playing time. I think it was more false promises about playing time than anything like that. Not necessarily false, but like he was promised like a certain amount and they didn't give it to him. So there's that. Apparently Michigan's heavily involved in them, along with a few others. I can't remember off the top of my head. I think Oregon might even be involved with them a bit. USC as well. So yeah, and then the last one is going to be Florida State edge Patrick Payton. He's entered the transfer portal. So that is also another. I think he had like 7.5 sacks on the season. So that's not an insignificant number by any stretch of the means. So the fact the fact he's entered the transfer portal right before the Orange Bowl, sheesh, it's rough for Florida State right now, especially since Johnny Wilson just declared for the draft. Earlier today, last night, some point over the last 24 hours, he's declared for the NFL draft, which means he's not going to be playing in the Orange Bowl. So we'll get a bit more into Florida State and that stuff when it all comes around. So just be a bit patient with us. Other news of players opting out of bowl games: Caleb Williams has officially opted out of the Holiday Bowl. So his college career is over. He's going to go to the draft, which, is what it is at this point. Not much else you can say.
I'm just glad he stopped playing the games about am I going, am I not, It's like, oh, we want to make sure he's going to a good a good franchise, a good organization. It's like, well, being is that he's probably going to be the number one overall pick, regardless of whether he goes in this year or next year. Probably going to be for an organization that is not good. So at this point, just take your money and don't risk getting hurt in college and losing all of it.
Yeah.
Personally, I never understood why he was playing these games of am I going, am I not? I don't know. Like, just go ahead and announce that you're going because everybody knows you're going to go. There's no point in waiting and risking getting hurt because you're going to play for a bad team regardless.
Mm-hmm. Another thing that he's got to think about, you're going to be the number one overall pick regardless, just like you said. He's going to be that. What he needs to realize, though, is him going now guarantees that he can go ahead and, like, he's going to be the number one overall pick whether he goes this year or next year, right? So,
Yep.
and a lot of people do not realize, but, like, I think if I remember correctly, like, the number one overall pick and signing bonus included was like $46 million is what they got for their first contract. Or no, wait, Bryce Young went and got like $40 million. Majority of it signing bonus because that's how they have to do it nowadays. And then I think like the 32nd pick got like $11 million overall. So there's a bit of a money difference, and more so than that, being the number one overall pick goes and gives you a long leash, right? So say he goes up and it doesn't pan out, and like 3 years from now, Bears are just as disenfranchised with him as they apparently are with Justin Fields right now. Then they can go and say, okay, well, we're going to let you go. And then some other team is going to be like, well, we think we can fix him, or we think we know what they did wrong, so we'll sign him to a contract and make him our starting quarterback. And as long as you perform at league average at that point, even if you're not the star they thought, you'll make you will have a long career as a backup, as a journeyman backup, as a backup. Just that's what a lot of people do not realize. These guys who don't necessarily pan out as number one overall picks, like obviously you automatically think of Jamarcus Russell and Ryan Leaf, but like there's several guys that haven't necessarily, and not just number one, but like top 10. You know, like once they get that long leash and like they prove that, hey, maybe you weren't the best overall player in that draft, but you've proved to be serviceable enough to be a career backup, that's still pretty valuable. So, Caleb Williams going ahead and going right now is probably a smart move. Him sitting out the Holiday Bowl is probably a smart move, especially with that atrocious USC team in general. So, who knows? Because now he can go ahead and start getting his money, whether or not he becomes the top guy that he's projected to be, or if he just becomes a career backup. Who knows? We don't know. Best wishes to him. Stop painting on your fingernails. But speaking of atrocious USC teams, right? USC team, USC defense, they have officially hired a new defensive coordinator from UCLA, their crosstown rival, Danton Lynn. So this is actually a pretty solid hire. Probably really helps them in the long run because this was his first year as defensive coordinator over at UCLA, if I remember correctly. And the year prior to him getting there, they had like the 78th scoring defense or 78th total defense. And this year, like they were ranked 11th. Whether that was total or scoring, I can't remember. But still, that's a massive improvement from Grinch. So you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, definitely improvement over Grinch. Probably the best hire they could have had. Like you said, I mean, he took a not a terrible UCLA defense, but they were definitely not great and turned them into one of the best. So I mean, if he can do anything like that at USC, then great. They're finally going to have a defense, and if you can have a good defense paired with that offense, it's going to be dangerous. Granted, is their offense going to be as good now that Caleb Williams is gone? Yet to be seen. We'll have to see who their quarterback's going to be, but I mean, it's definitely the right move. I think out of anybody you could have hired for that DC spot, he was Danton Lim was the right hire, and you get to pull him away from a crosstown rival and a conference rival.
Mm-hmm.
So to get that away from them is an awesome hire for USC. Yeah, never thought I'd say that.
Me neither.
So, I mean, if he can get that USC defense anywhere near what he had the UCLA defense, it is going to be a home run hire. And considering the talent on that USC defense is significantly better than what UCLA had, just like prospect wise, it could be very dangerous. And USC could be very dangerous if Lincoln Riley stays and that offense is what it is, and he can take that defense to being what he's shown he can do. So definitely exciting for USC fans. I would be very excited.
Mm-hmm. I'll let you lead into the next one because Lord knows I've talked enough. Right?
All right, moving on. Be our first conference championship game review will be number 24 Liberty defeating New Mexico State 49-35. Probably a lot closer than most people thought it would be, considering Liberty was undefeated.
Liberty.
But they pull it off. I mean, it is a good game, good win. New Mexico State's quarterback did not have a great game. Diego Pavia, only 188 yards, but 3 touchdowns and another touchdown on the ground. So
Yep.
It was not the worst game. Plus their other quarterback, Blaze. I'm not even going to try.
Berlowitz.
I don't even know how to pronounce
Berlowitz.
that. Berlowitz. Also, not a bad game. 10 for 19,
really
134 yards. Who?
Hayden Salter.
Very good game.
Very good game.
Very good game. I mean, is that almost 450 yards? 472 yards on the ground. I mean, total 319 in the 481. I mean, 319 in the air and another 162 on the ground.
Yeah.
On 12 carries.
Yeah.
That is a heck of an average.
Yeah, trust me. I was like, oh my gosh.
And super accurate too. I mean, 20 for 25.
He's their leading rusher.
I mean, that was a really good game from him. And CJ Daniels, 7 receptions, 157 yards, and a touchdown. I mean, Liberty's dangerous. Granted, they hadn't played anybody this year, but
yeah, argument could be made that SMU should be the one in the New Year's Six Bowl over them, but SMU wasn't undefeated.
Yeah.
So
yeah, unfortunately. Well, we'll get into that later.
Yeah.
We'll get into that later.
Yeah, just a bit.
But yeah, I mean, Liberty pulls off a big win and gets to play in a New Year's Six Bowl because of it. Moving on to game 2. Number 3, Washington defeated number 5, Oregon 34-31. Now, remind me, what was the score the last time they played?
36-33 Washington.
Uh-huh. So it seems like Washington is just a field goal better than Oregon.
At this point, yeah.
Now, Bo Nix, really great game. It just seemed like... Now, Washington had me in the first half. I'm not going to lie. Washington looked like they was going to run away with this one. I mean, it was like, 17-0?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, Lord. Washington is about to just wallop Oregon. And then Oregon decided they were going to come back. And I went to bed because it was like 10 o'clock. I'm tired of Pac-12 games. I'm so glad Pac-12, after dark is gone. But, I mean, Bo Nix, really good game. nothing really going on the ground, nothing really going on through the air. No big games through the air for Oregon, nothing going on the ground really. It was basically the Bo Nix show.
Yeah.
On offense for Oregon, and it was the Michael Penix, Romo Dunze, and Jalen McMillan show for Washington.
Don't forget Dylan Johnson.
Everybody had a great game for Washington.
Washington's offense just showed up.
And Dylan Johnson, 2 for 2 for 5 yards.
That.
And a touchdown. Good Lord. Yeah.
I just said that.
I mean,
don't forget Dylan Johnson.
Nice. I mean,
2 for 2. He had a passing touchdown.
I mean, but I think a lot of this game had to do with
what?
I feel like a lot of this game had to do with basically people counting Washington out, but basically saying Oregon's going to come in. It was basically a foregone conclusion to some people that even though Washington had beaten Oregon earlier in the year, that Oregon was going to come in here and beat Washington and make it to the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they took that personally. And they showed up, and they wanted to come in that game and show everybody that they were going to come in and they belonged in the playoffs. And they definitely, showed that they belong in the playoffs. And I definitely think it'll be a good round 1 game against Texas.
Yep. Just Jesus. It was Washington was a 9.5 point underdog. Everyone, us included, picked Oregon. Washington said
I did not.
I thought you did.
Nope, I picked Washington. Roll back the tape. I picked Washington.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, you did. Okay. No, I had to think on that one for a second.
Mm-hmm.
I know we deferred on another one. Right?
Yes, and I was wrong.
Okay. So we're still even. Okay. So, we really need to start writing this down.
Yes, we do.
Oh, well, next season. Or maybe during the Bowls. I don't know yet. But no, they came in and they did have something to prove. They probably got sick and tired of being like, oh, well, they're going to lose, so Oregon this, Oregon that, da-da-da. And boy, howdy, they shut me up. I was wrong. I'm sorry, Washington. I'm sorry, Huskies. I'm sorry, Michael Penix Jr. I'm not going to embarrass myself like Desmond Howard and say what he said. But anyways, next game, SMU defeated number 22 Tulane, 26-14. This was a bit of a shocker to me, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
I didn't expect Tulane to lose this one.
No, I mean, they had everything to play for. They win this game, they're in the Year 6 Bowl, and, they would have deserved it. They'd had a great year up to this point.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, SMU's defense just showed up. I mean, 7 sacks. They had 7 sacks. I mean, just to show, if you look at Michael Pratt's rushing numbers, 10 carries for negative 35 yards.
Yeah, no, it was...
And a touchdown. That's how many sacks they got.
SMU had 7 sacks.
I mean... Yeah. So, and the thing is, Michael Pratt and Tulane's offense didn't have a terrible game. I mean, 238 yards, touchdown, and interception, and another touchdown on the ground. But, I mean, SMU's defense was just showed up. I mean, nobody expected SMU to come in here and beat Tulane.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't, and I know you didn't. We expected Tulane to come in here and have something to play for and win this game, and it looks like they thought the same thing we thought. They thought they were going to come in there and kill SMU, and SMU said no and showed up and just dominated in the trenches. And in modern day college football, that's what you have to do. You have to dominate the trenches, and that's what they did.
Yeah, they did. Like I said earlier, 7 sacks on the day. The moment you get 7 sacks on a team, you should not lose that game. If your defense, if your defense is getting to the quarterback 7 times, you should not lose that game. I think the argument could be made that SMU got screwed over by the rankings committee because they had a far tougher schedule than Liberty. Like, I think their strength of schedule ended up being like 33rd or something like that in the country, or something like that. And then like Liberty's was ranked like 100 and something. So the argument could be made that SMU was a more deserving New Year's Six team, because I think Liberty's going to go and they're going to get stomped when they go and play their New Year's Six game. It ain't going to be pretty. No, it's not going to be pretty. I had to go and look who they're playing in that, but yeah, no. Next game, the Big Ten Championship. Number 2 Michigan defeated number 16 Iowa 26-0. It's a very Iowa-like game, right?
Yeah.
And I
mean,
go.
It's pathetic. I mean, it was the worst game of the weekend. It was just boring, and Iowa's defense tried to show up and held Michigan to only 26 points, which is pretty good. And if they had an offense that was worth anything, they might have been in this game late. But they did not. I mean, their most notable player on offense was Deacon Hill, who was 18 for 32 for 120 yards.
Yeah.
That's it. That's their most notable player.
Yeah, I had half a mind to go and put, to be a real smartass on this, and put Torrey Taylor and his total yardage on punts, like his average, but like that would, I felt like that would have been too mean. He's their best player.
Yeah, he sure gets a lot of practice.
Lord knows he does. Should be the Ray Guy winner.
God, yeah.
JJ McCarthy was 22 of 30 for 147 yards. He got the ball to the people he needed to get him to at the end of the day. Very, very efficient with his throws. Well, maybe not necessarily efficient so much as he didn't throw that many bad passes. Blake Horn won them this game though. So he had 16 carries for 52 yards and 2 touchdowns. God bless. I hate reading these Big Ten stat lines. I hate it.
Mm-hmm. Awful.
It's awful. Like, we can try. Like, do you honestly believe Michigan stands a chance against Alabama?
No.
I don't think so either. Spoiler alerts, people. We'll make our official predictions around like a week out from that game. And we're going, but like, I don't see them beating Alabama at this point. Which, good riddance to them, freaking cheaters. But still, just I'm not going to go into a rant. We'll just move on to the next game. You want to take this one?
Yeah. Number 7 Texas throttled number 18 Oklahoma State. This was not close and was never close.
Yep.
Texas just showed up and had the game of their life. As a big FU to the Big 12, winning the Big 12 championship the last year of them being in the Big 12. I mean, if you look at it, Quinn Ewers, 452 yards, 4 touchdowns, and interception. I mean, that whole offense was just going, and Texas's defense just showed up, and Oklahoma State really didn't have anything for them. I mean, it was just a old-fashioned beatdown. It was old school Texas that showed up to that game, and they just killed them. And I feel like that's what a lot of people expected. I mean, I would have much rather seen Oklahoma get in the Big 12 championship game and have a rematch, because I think it would have been a much closer game and a much more exciting game.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
But obviously, it's not how real life works. Oklahoma State gets in and doesn't really belong there, but gets lucky and gets destroyed by Texas, who is having a great year. So,
yeah, it was 452 yards from Ewers. He had an interception, but, when you throw 4 touchdowns, you can forgive 1 interception.
Mm-hmm.
It was an ass kicking, man. Ain't much else to really talk about on that, because you really said it all. Just every player that could have showed up for Texas, they did. A.D. Mitchell had over 100 yards. Jatavion Sanders had over 100 yards. So, yeah, it was stupid. Oklahoma State never stood a chance. Game 6, number 4. And yes, we are going based on the rankings heading into this week, or heading into championship week. And we will discuss that later. Like I said, number 4, FSU defeated number 14 Louisville 16-6. This was an old-fashioned defensive style game. But it was also a lot more entertaining than Michigan versus Iowa. Just like, you okay?
Yep, I just sneezed.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I've had like 4 sneezes in a row. I don't know why.
Whew. Bless
Came
you.
out of nowhere.
Anyways, no. FSU versus Louisville. It was a more entertaining variation of Michigan versus Iowa. Jesus, it's late. I'm getting tired. But this one was 3-3 at halftime. 3-3 at halftime. The first touchdown didn't get scored until the third quarter by Florida State. It was just, they never trailed. They had 7 sacks, and their defense showed that they were probably one of the, I would argue and say they were one of the top defenses this year. And we didn't even realize it, especially in this game. If I remember correctly, this was the first time all year that Jeff Brom's Louisville team had been held to under 200 yards. So I don't see any way you could have kept Florida State out of the playoffs. We'll get into that later. You got any thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I mean, Florida State's defense won this game. Obviously, Florida State going with third string quarterback. Brock Glenn 8 for 21, 55 yards. Not great, but it's what you had to do. I mean, it's unfortunate you lose your starter and second string quarterback in basically back-to-back weeks, and you got to try and go at this with your third string quarterback, but they pulled it off, and they had a really good game plan. They ran the ball really well, 10 carries, 118 yards for Lawrence Toafili. That's what I'm going with.
Yeah.
And, the defense showed up, like you said, 7 sacks and an interception. So they did everything they needed to go undefeated and secure their way into the playoffs. And apparently, games don't matter. So
we'll get into it.
We'll get into that later.
We'll get into it after we finish with this last game. Obviously, you can tell SEC championship game was the last game that we had up here. It was honestly the best game of the week. Was it?
Yep.
I don't know. Anyways, number 8 Alabama defeated number 1 Georgia 27-24. This was one of Carson Beck, and I say this jokingly, one of his worst games. He went 21 for 29, 243 yards, and then he had 8 carries for -2 yards and 1 rushing touchdown. Jalen Milroe, 13 of 23, 192 yards, 2 touchdowns, and then 14 carries for 29 yards. Realistically, it said 14 carries on the stat line. It was actually 10 carries because they do count sacks as a carry in college. So there is that. Kendall Milton for Georgia, he had 13 carries for 42 yards and 2 touchdowns. Roydell Williams for Alabama, 16 carries, 64 yards and a touchdown. It was, I don't even know how to describe this game, honestly. Part of me wants to say evenly matched, but then another part of me wants to say that Alabama dominated the line of scrimmage. It felt like that. They really did dominate the line of scrimmage most of the game. I don't know if it's a mental thing for Georgia at this point that they can't beat Alabama in Atlanta. I don't know if it's that. I don't know if it's the injuries. I don't know if it's the refs. I don't know if it's a mental thing. End of the day, though, Alabama won. Georgia had a chance to win and could not capitalize. That's you will never, and as we've said multiple times on this thing, Georgia fans here trying to talk about the entirety of the collegiate world, you will never hear me give the excuse of, oh, well, if Brock and Ladd weren't injured. Nah, that ain't coming out of my mouth. Except for that time, and that's just say, hey, it won't actually ever come out of my mouth. I saw so many Alabama fans. Well, if Jamison Williams didn't get hurt, or if Medi didn't get hurt, don't care. Don't care. Part of this game is the physicality of it. Injuries happen. So part of the strategy for these games is to have the better overall depth as well. End of the day, Georgia lost. Plain and simple. You'll never hear me say otherwise. Alabama was a better team. And yeah, that's really it. Georgia could have won this. They made the last mistake. Was another thing, right? Because that fumble on the end around, that's worked multiple times this year. It's just the one time it didn't, right? They fumbled the snap. Or they fumbled the handoff. I'm giving you free reign on your thoughts on that. I say free reign. I don't actually mean free reign. I'm saying, hey, your thoughts now. Because I know if I gave you free reign, I know we're not monetized yet, but they would probably monetize us just to demonetize us over what you would say. I know you.
Yeah, I mean, Alabama showed up. They knew they were playing for a playoff spot, or in the hopes that they would get a playoff spot, and they showed up. It was a really good game. I mean, like you said, I'm never gonna blame injuries or bad refs or anything like that because it's football and it is what it is. Like you said, Alabama dominated the line of scrimmage. Georgia couldn't get anything going on the ground, and Georgia's defense could not stop the run. That has been Georgia's Achilles heel all year, is stopping a running quarterback, and they couldn't do it. So, I mean, it was a good game. I don't necessarily agree with how far they dropped Georgia, but we'll get into that later. But, I mean, all I'll say is that was the worst Georgia game I've seen in the last 30 games since the last time they played Alabama in Atlanta, and they only lost by 3 points. So,
and you know what happened? You know what their very next game was after they lost to Alabama in Atlanta by 3 points?
What?
The Orange Bowl against Michigan. And then 29 games later, here we are. It is what it is. Losses happen. Supposedly they matter. And we'll go ahead and get into that. The New Year's Six Bowls. The playoff games are going to be the Rose Bowl and the Sugar Bowl. Michigan is the number 1 seed. They've picked to go and play at the Rose Bowl. Makes sense. That's kind of like a Big Ten tradition. You get to go and play at the Rose Bowl. If you don't make necessarily the national championship, the next highest Big Ten team is going to get to be the Rose Bowl representative, unless the Rose Bowl is part of the playoff. rotation that year, in which case they are this year. Michigan decide, hey, we want to have Alabama go and meet us over in California, play in the Rose Bowl. So that's going to be that matchup. The Sugar Bowl is going to be number 2 Washington versus number 3 Texas. Poor Washington on this, right? Yellow.
Sorry.
Everything okay?
I don't know what happened. My headphone cut out for a second. I don't know why. I couldn't hear anything you were saying.
It's all good. It's all good. We're live, buddy. Sugar Bowl, number 2 Washington versus number 3 Texas. It's in New Orleans, literally almost right down the road from Austin, in a sense, at least compared to Washington. Feels a bit unfair
Right.
for Washington, right?
Very, very unfair.
Yeah. It's just one of those things where it's like, wow, that could have gone better for Washington. The next, and right now we're just doing New Year's Six bowls, and I swear after that we'll get into our reactions over the finality of the rankings. Cotton Bowl is going to be number 7 Ohio State versus number 9 Mizzou. So Mizzou did in fact get a New Year's Six bowl berth. Congrats to them. Congrats to Drinks. I would say that right now Mizzou would probably be the favorite. And like I said, we're not getting too in depth just yet. The time for previews will happen. We do have a preview this week, but that will be after our final rankings reaction. Mizzou probably will be the favorite because of how many people are leaving Ohio State right now. Like we said earlier during the transfer portal stuff, because Kyle McCord's already in the transfer portal. He's been the one running the offense all year. Who are you going to have start now? Like, whoever they are, they are going to be pretty inexperienced at this point. So there is that. The Peach Bowl is going to be number 10 Penn State versus number 11 Ole Miss. So that should be I would say that should be a good matchup, but I think Ole Miss might win that one pretty handedly. Penn State just doesn't have this offense to go and stack up with them right now, I don't think. And then the Orange Bowl, number 5 FSU will face number 6 Georgia. I promise we're almost there to talk about that. Fiesta Bowl will be number 8 Oregon versus number 23 Liberty. Like I said earlier, I do not see Liberty winning that. Now, I'll let you go off, Bonner. Just say what you want about your thoughts on the playoff ranking.
Why do we play a regular season? Because apparently none of it matters.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for the first time ever, in the 14 college football playoff rankings, a undefeated conference champion is not in the playoffs over two 1-loss teams getting into the playoffs over an undefeated conference champion because their starter got hurt and they missed their second string quarterback for 1 week, who would be back well before the playoffs, who actually played pretty good against Florida. But because they had a third string quarterback in a conference championship game, which they won, they get to miss out on the playoffs because they think Alabama is unequivocally better than Florida State. And Alabama probably is better than Florida State. But why do we play the regular season? Why? Like, you're basically saying, yeah, we know you just went undefeated and had a really good season, and you just won your conference championship, and you didn't lose a game all year. So we're dropping you from the 4th spot to the 5th spot because number 8 Alabama just beat the number 1 team by 3 points on a neutral field, and you're getting dropped. Like, I can understand Texas getting in. Texas killed Oklahoma State, had 1 loss, and it was a close loss against Oklahoma on a neutral site. And Texas has played great since then. but Alabama, who, granted, down the last stretch of this, that last stretch of the year, Alabama has been great, but it's not like they killed Georgia in the conference championship game and then jumped 4 spots up to 4 and they dropped Florida State. It just makes zero sense to me. I'm fine with the rankings other than FSU being out. Because basically what you've just said is don't schedule good out of conference games. Don't schedule don't schedule good Power 5 teams out of conference. Don't do it. You schedule the easiest schedule possible, go undefeated, and sit your players out so they don't get injured. That's what you said. That's the precedent you set. Luckily, we don't have to deal with this next year because it'll be a 12-team playoff. Granted, I'm sure there will still be people complaining about, number 12 got in over a team that was more deserving because there's 12 teams that apparently are good enough to make it into the playoffs.
I think it'd be more like number 11 should have been in because number 12 is going to be that group of 5, whatever group of 5 team.
Yeah.
Get, so technically,
the highest ranked group of 5 team.
So like this year had Oklahoma. Had it been a 12-year team playoff,
it'd have been Liberty.
Like some of the conferences wanted, then Oklahoma would have been the odd man out. Liberty would be the 12th seed over them.
Yep.
I've had 3-4 days to go over this. We were actually there with each other when these rankings were revealed, and it was shocking, this was bad no matter how you cut it, because if the argument's always been either the 4 best or the 4 most deserving, if it was the actual 4 best, in no particular order, it would have been, I think the argument could be made based on strength of schedule and everything, the 4 best would have been Washington, Georgia, Alabama, Texas. And I would have been fine with that because then they would have put the 4 best in. If they had gone 4 most deserving, it would have been Michigan at 1, Washington at 2, Texas at 3, and then Florida State at 4. I truly do believe that. And yet they put Alabama in. Now, if you can actually use your brain cells to actually think, why they would have lost about ESPN would have lost about $150 million had they put FSU in over Alabama. That was kind of a big thing right there, right? The funny thing is, It took them till early Sunday morning to go and actually finalize the poll because of the number 4 spot. Apparently it took them like 2 or 3 votes that morning to vote Bama in. Yet when they had ended the thing the night before, it had been like 7, 8, 9 votes, and they could not get a decisive decision on who number 4 should have been. I think they were leaning more towards Florida State at that point. And then next thing you know, Alabama's in. It was, no matter how you slice it, Florida State got screwed. And like I said, if it was 4 best teams, Alabama does deserve to be in there. But the way they did this, they picked and they choose. They cherry-picked this one to help suit their pockets in a way, I guess, is what is my feelings on it. Right? I as a Georgia fan, I knew, and like we've said, Georgia fans all this time, trying to remain as unbiased as possible. I had already, going into Saturday, I had known that had Georgia lost that game, which they did, we would be out of the playoffs because Texas went and beat Alabama earlier. And that was the whole thing. Alabama doesn't beat, if Alabama beats Texas earlier in the season, both Alabama and Georgia are in. But because Texas beat Alabama, we could not afford the loss to them. That happened. I'm not mad about us not being in the playoffs. We lost. We did not deserve to be in there. Florida State was an undefeated conference champion. You cannot tell me that they do not deserve to be in that. It's rough to be a Florida State fan at this point. It's rough to be a Florida State player at this point. Because the fact they basically said, hey, Jordan Travis meant that much to your team. Why is he not one of the Final Four for the Heisman? I mean, you basically just said he's the Heisman winner. Because if he's the only reason they're not in the playoffs, what the hell are we doing? I
agree.
The thing you pointed out to me earlier today about the coach media availability getting canceled for the Orange Bowl, I don't think FSU's happy with this. I think they might be doing something about this. Right?
They should.
If they just said screw it to ESPN, like this game doesn't matter, and walked off the field before kickoff even happened, I wouldn't be mad. They'd have every right to be.
No, I think it's hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as much as I want to see Georgia play a bowl game, I would be laughing my butt off if Florida State came out of the tunnel, warmed up, went back in, ran out of the tunnel before the game started, and everybody's waiting on them to come out on the field. They send it down to the sideline, and Mike Norvell says, well, the games don't matter, so we're not playing this one, and they just walk off the field. I would laugh because they would have basically said, screw you, ESPN, screw you, College Football Playoff Committee. If the games don't matter, then why are we even playing this game? And just walk off the field and cost ESPN millions.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. Just, that would, I would probably be right there with you. It's just unfathomable at this point. Like, if they did do that, that would be one heck of a statement. And
Yeah.
But I also think ESPN would try to sue them. I don't think ESPN would win that one, though. Or they probably wouldn't sue them because Florida State would countersue. And then Lord knows what you'd find in discovery. So,
Yep.
Anyway, I think we spent long enough talking on that. It's late. It's almost 1 a.m. for us right now while we're recording this.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and get into our preview for this upcoming week. And yes, I said preview for this upcoming week, even though we just reviewed this past week. From here on out, we are going to 1 episode a week. Once the next season, once the next year's season kicks off, we'll probably start going back to 2 episodes a week, preview, review.
Yeah.
We might have an emergency episode every now and then, depending. But as of right now, we've only got 1 game upcoming this week. For those of you who know what it is, you know how important this game is, right?
Yep. America's game.
This is America's game. Once labeled as the game of the century in 1945 because of the implications it had on the national title picture. This is the Army-Navy game, right? This game, like you said, is America's game. This is such a cliche line. I've heard it used over and over and over again. Each and every year this game comes around. But it is true, right? This is the only game of the year where every person out there playing on that field would willingly lay their lives down on the line for everyone watching the game. For a lot of these guys, this is their last go. You know, the first classmen, as the seniors are called at both Army and Navy. This game is reserved for this week for a reason. And it should be the only game this week. I'll tell you right now, the line right now is Army minus 2.5. The over-under is 27.5, as it should be for 2 teams that basically run the triple option.
Yep.
And I'll just go ahead and tell you, we both I think we both already know we're deferring on this pick, right?
Yep.
Okay. Uh, and the reason why we're deferring on this pick is relatives, right? My grandfather
Yeah.
served in the army on D-Day. He was at Normandy on D-Day with the army. Um, my uncle was a drill sergeant with the army. My great uncle, I should say, and he also served in Nam. So, for me, it is a very simple: go Army, beat Navy.
Yeah. I mean, my grandfather was in the Navy during World War II, but my other grandfather was in the Army. So
Oof.
technically, technically, I don't really care who wins this game, but I've always had an affinity for Navy. I've always loved Navy. So for me, very simple: go Navy, beat Army. Like, in this game, anything can happen. I know on paper, Army is technically a better team than Navy, but it's America's game, man. It's
Yep.
rivalry week for these two teams, and this is something that they care very much about. This is their Super Bowl, so anything can happen in this game,
Mm-hmm.
and it's slated to be another good one.
Yeah.
So
Another little thing to go and keep a note on, right? Always some great uniforms in this game.
always,
Always. So this year, Army's going to be going with the Rock of the Marne uniforms, and Navy is going to be going with the Silent Service uniforms. So, for those of you who don't know what the Silent Service is, that is for uh, the midshipmen, not midshipmen, but the naval seamen, shipmen who are on the submarines, because they're known as the silent service because you had to be silent back then, back during World War II and the likes, and still now even sonars and all that. So, but yes, it should be a great matchup with some great uniforms. Um, you got a favorite all time uniform from either side?
um, I don't know if Navy wore this in the Army Navy game, but their Blue Angels uniform, I love.
I
I love
think
their
they
Blue
did.
Angels
I
uniform.
think they did. Um, personally, there was, I can't remember it off the top of my head. Uh, what year it was or anything, but there were two different uniforms. There was one from Army and one from Navy that I really liked. Um, the one from Army, it was like this all white uniform. It was based around this Italian, or what's the other words? Uh, crap, I was not in the military. Uh, I'll just say battalion or something that was, they were all up in the Alps or something over in Europe during World War II, I think. So it was like an all white uniform look, and so out of all the ones that I've seen from them, I think that was my favorite. But from Navy, it had to be that year they had the individually hand painted helmets. So like,
Oh, those were awesome.
yes, and so like, if I remember correctly, each position group had their own ship on the side. I think the offensive line was aircraft carriers. I can't remember the other ones, but it was insane, and they were all like hand painted. It was so cool. Crap. Let me look that up real quick. Maybe hand painted helmets. Oh, apparently the Blue Angel ones were hand painted too, I think. Uh,
That's awesome.
yes. Back in 2015, right? Uh, during the 115th one, right? The linebackers had cruisers on theirs. The defensive backs had destroyers. Wide receivers had the submarines. Lo and behold, linemen did not have the aircraft destroyer. That is on me. They had the amphibious assault ships. The quarterback was the aircraft carrier. That's on me. Which makes sense.
Yeah.
And then the running backs had the littoral combat ship. Oh, kickers and special teams had minesweepers. Can't ever forget the specialists. They are football players, people. So yeah, that was an incredible uniform that year. And the helmets for this year are hand painted as well. So go figure. Navy just really likes those hand painted helmets, I guess. Wonder if the Army cadets have kidnapped Bill yet. Jesus. Hey, you know that's tradition.
Yeah.
I still remember the time they went and kidnapped the wrong Bill. That was a hilarious story. Anyways, it's late or early, depending on your depiction of it. Well,
yeah.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode. We'll be back next week with a preview of some bowl games and reviewing not only the Army-Navy game, but any big news that happened in the transfer portal while we were off air. See you guys.
See you guys. Have a good night.